All right, so we're still in section 2, but this is the last part of section 2, Making Bitcoin Easy, and it's entitled, What are Bitcoin's biggest weaknesses, challenges, and how can it fail? Okay, so let's do it. Anyone who says that Bitcoin has no weaknesses, challenges, or threats, or that it can't ever fail is either ill-informed or not telling the truth. They're just lying. Bitcoin has weaknesses and it can fail. I would encourage anyone that is seriously considering investing in Bitcoin to research its weaknesses and how it can fail and to stay up to date on all matters. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And I know you might be thinking, well, Peter, didn't you say at least one time nothing can stop Bitcoin? That's true. I don't believe, to be clear, I don't believe Bitcoin is going to fail. I don't believe there's any threat big enough that will stop it. And I still don't believe anything can stop Bitcoin. And I'll just give you a preview of what I'm about to say. But one of the only things that could stop Bitcoin is if people just didn't want to use it anymore. As long as one or two people want it, I don't think anyone can stop it. I literally do not think anyone or anything in the world can stop it. So I'll explain more about that now. Okay, so we're going to start first with weaknesses and threats. Weakness or threat number one, Bitcoin's biggest weakness is that it hasn't been able to scale as a payment network, which is to say Bitcoin hasn't overtaken Visa as a payment network as of yet, or even come close. In late 2017, at the last major rally, Bitcoin's usage almost came to a halt, with transactions taking much longer to process than usual to be added to the blockchain. Transaction fees skyrocketed, and it just really wasn't a great situation, regardless, even the price was really high. Each block in the blockchain, as you already know, contains all the legitimate transactions during a 10-minute period, and that block has a file size, just like a photo or a video. The more transactions equals bigger blocks, which equals bigger files, and that ends up clogging the network if it's too big and not fast enough. This doesn't mean that it's not working or that people aren't using it. It just means that it hasn't replaced something like Visa yet or come close. Now, I will give a counter argument to this, and that is the Lightning Network. I've talked about that just a little bit, I think in the last video too. This has a chance to successfully scale Bitcoin and potentially leapfrog existing technologies like Visa. It's been in development for a long time, maybe even 5 to 10 years, as long as I've been around Bitcoin. And it's now closer than ever to really being widespread released and used by everyone commercially. There are several other coins that claim to better scale than Bitcoin, but they're not even close the size of Bitcoin, and they still haven't fully solved the problem. Nobody has. That doesn't mean that there won't be another coin that would appear on the scene in the future that has clever problems or clever solutions to this problem, or solves it completely. That might happen too. But even if it doesn't, Bitcoin is beneficial enough to many people in different ways to stay relevant and world-changing. Second weakness or threat, it's too big to diversify. Okay, and what I mean by that is Bitcoin might be too big for developers to risk changing too much to accommodate other use cases. So keep that in mind. Bitcoin developers in the industry had at least one major fight several years ago in 2017 that led to a schism, that's a church history term, and a new coin, Bitcoin Cash, BCH, was born. The same thing happened within BCH itself, Bitcoin Cash, and that broke off into other coins, and it's happened with other altcoins as well. Right now, Bitcoin is a great store of value and hedge against inflation like gold. I think it was Gavin Andreessen who said this in a documentary I saw a long time ago, but when he was addressing why can't more changes be made to Bitcoin faster or bigger ones, he talked about how he used the analogy of either a cruise ship at sea or like a plane in the air. I'll just say cruise ship at sea because I like going on cruises. But he said to the interviewer, he said, look, Bitcoin is like this massive cruise ship out at sea. It's got people on it. It's got workers. It's got, all types of things going on inside of it, all these hundreds of different processes. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. If you were to make a major change, that could have a serious effect on everyone involved. So you have to be careful. You have to tread lightly. You can't just, it's a tiny rudder to move a massive ship. And I never forgot that, because when you think about how many people use Bitcoin, how large its market cap is, you kind of understand why. You can't just make these massive updates and just expect things to change overnight. That is not how software works. I'm not a programmer, but I've worked with enough programmers and seen enough code and work with in enough companies to know that just because you do an update, just because you test and test and test, doesn't mean that after you implement something, the whole thing doesn't break. That happens. It hasn't happened to Bitcoin yet. There's been a couple kinks along the way, but it could. It could very well happen. Number 3, there's a massive threat to commercial banking and central banking, or if you want to call currency creation or running a country or a government. Bitcoin challenges all of that and more. This weakness is kind of sort of like all encompassing, but Bitcoin has a chance to make banks go the way of post offices. They're still around, but not many people use them nowadays when you consider the alternatives. Email almost completely nullified the USPS, and banks know this. And that's why they're likely behind the biggest pushes for more regulation and restricting Bitcoin's spread, its usage. They know they can't stop it. They know that. The best that they can do in countries is slow it down. But the same can be said for central banks and governments around the world, because Bitcoin threatens to replace traditional currencies themselves, wholesale changes to currencies, which is what governments use to fund wars, collect taxes, and enforce public policy, provide services, and run the country. Number 4, Bitcoin hasn't been broken down in such a way for it to be easily understood by everyone, so everyone can understand it. This is kind of where I come in. This is the weakness or threat that I hope to help with this e-course. But I think we need a lot more, okay? The sooner that we have more of these so-called killer apps, as they call them, using Bitcoin and blockchain that become viral and change the world, the faster we're going to have adoption. Bitcoin hasn't really had its AOL moment, which is a phrase, I know Andreas, I've heard him use it a lot, where a tipping point happens and millions of people use the new technology overnight, which is what happened with AOL. But I believe if people could better understand and realize why Bitcoin matters and what it is, it would change things overnight. And I'm excited about that. Okay, so here's some challenges.